Welcome. This is Taylor and I. We just kind of go crazy. I hit the record button before he was ready. This is what we do. It's spontaneity, people.
This is, just likes to ambush me with the record.
That's right. Well, I figured the banter is the best part.
Yeah.
You seem to have some kind of secret Twitter food that I'm curious about, because when I look at Twitter, it's just this massive stuff, and it updates weird. I can never get the most recent thing, especially on the phone app. For some reason, it just keeps refreshing. There's never the most recent feed. And so I've tried using TweetDeck. I've tried some other things. I still just have a hard time discovering good stuff on there. Do you have any secrets, or are you just reading it a lot?
I feel like I'm probably reading it a lot more than I should, if that's any insight there. So the one thing, though, I think that I changed kind of how I interact with Twitter. Initially, or X, whatever we're calling it now. I'm going to continue to call it Twitter. But I had talked to somebody about, people said the same thing, like, hey, like I get jobs off of Twitter. And I said, well, I enjoy using Twitter. Out of all the social media platforms, Twitter is one that I actually don't hate. There's a lot of good tech stuff on there and those sorts of things. Early on, it used to be a really great way to get a hold of companies when you couldn't write I can't get through to support, but I can tweet at them, and all of a sudden my issue's going to be fixed in an hour kind of type thing. And so, but I have switched away at a certain point to just really focusing more so on trying to engage with other people. And as I've engaged with other people, so, just replying to posts and things like that, rather than just tweeting out random things or whatever, that seems to have surfaced better interactions in general, just because I'm trying to be more engaging rather than creating content specific to Twitter. I've been trying to just do that. And for whatever reason, after doing that for probably several weeks, just making that more so the mindset, getting on there to engage rather than to either create my own content or whatever kind of type thing. That seems to have helped out a lot. So I've met a lot of really cool people through Twitter because of that. So big fan.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'll try to do more of that too. My other issue too is I'm sort of split strategically between using the Liquid Weekly Twitter profile to do stuff versus using my personal profile to do stuff.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people do personal brand kind of thing where they're tweeting always from their, kind of like you and Kurt and other folk, Gil. But I tend to stay with the Liquid Weekly profile because I don't know.
Just because, and I think different strategies work for different people. Like I said, for everything else on social media, I don't like using Facebook all that much as far as creating content for Facebook or Instagram. I've never got Instagram, even though I know a lot of friends who said they've been very successful interacting with other people on Instagram or getting jobs off of Instagram and stuff like that. It's just never worked for me because I just don't get it. So for those, I do really just have that. My business that I operate under is the Pages Media. So I do just have accounts for that, and I post content on there once a week just to try to have a presence, right? But other than that, I don't engage or interact with people with those accounts. I just use my personal accounts on the platforms that I enjoyed using. So LinkedIn's another good one where I found a lot of work through there and also met a lot of really cool people through there. So that's one that I try to be more active, and from that perspective, I do approach it from the more personal perspective. But if you're not a Twitter guy, don't force it. Don't even mess with it.
I'm a Twitter guy. I can tweet.
I can twit. I'm a twit.
No, I do remember I'm going to go ahead and tangent. I was going to say my story about the first time I used Twitter, and I was like, this is pointless, but it was a long time ago. Now I get it. But
now you
let's
get
see
it.
Here. Yeah. Yeah, thanks for diving right in. So in terms of kind of updates of what we're working on and what life's thrown our way, so I have been focused on exploring Shopify functions and checkout extensions, which is a whole new world for me. It's been very humbling, and I'm not going to talk too much about it today because I still am so ignorant. People would just turn this podcast off because of the misinformation spewing forth. But hopefully soon I'll be able to talk more in depth about it. But essentially what I'm trying to do is write my first checkout extension, and along with having to learn about how that works, I'm also using React, which I'm not a React guy. I've tried to stay, my wheelhouse is more Ruby land, server-side rendering, that sort of thing. And if anything, I've messed around with Vue. But this, I figure, the masses are going with React. I'll try React. Partially because I'm also using Gadget to kind of do the app.
I was going to ask if you were building it from the ground up or if you were going to use Gadget for that.
So it's humbling. 3 new sort of technologies slash paradigms at once. And it's like, oh, I've been a seasoned developer, been around a long time, I'm pretty comfortable with development. It's hard to appreciate sometimes for new folks that are getting into stuff, just how overwhelming it can be. So opportunities like this are a nice reminder of like, okay, when you have zero context around some of the stuff, it's just a lot to kind of take in and figure out a way to sort of navigate through it and get some bare basic stuff done. So
that's awesome. What are you, if you don't mind me asking, what are you building? What's your first checkout extension attempt here?
Yeah, it is a checkout extension to verify customers' ages. So certain products might be age restricted, and those rules might vary by state or by locale. So there are apps in the App Store that already do this, but none that are checkout extensions, and I'm kind of niching down to a particular market anyway. So we'll see. It's a great exercise to try to learn how all this works. And
yeah, that's awesome. Have you seen, so probably by the time we release this, it's probably going to be closed, but Gadget had released an incubator as well, where they have this open program where they're going to basically work with a handful of people, kind of mentor them and help them launch as well. So that's pretty cool that they're doing that, I thought.
Yeah, I saw that too. I did see that on Twitter. Saw that much. And I was like, oh, maybe I should do that too. But I need to dig a little deeper. Do you have any sense of the time commitment? Because that would be my big thing. It's like, oh man.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure they have an FAQ on their site. Let me see if I can pull this up while we're talking here. And I think the idea was like 5 to 10 hours a week kind of type thing. So I know it's not super heavy necessarily, or I could be making that up. So at least by the time this launches, though, they'll be like, oh yeah, like
main gig, side gig, family, free time, incubator.
It's hard, right? Like that's
possible.
I had talked to Mo was the original way. So Mo's one of the co-founders, and he had reached out, just been like, "Hey, have you seen this? Like, maybe you should apply or whatever. It would be a good thing potentially to work out for." And I have such trouble saying no. I don't know if you're like this as well. You are, because your schedule is also incredibly loaded, and so I had to honestly look at my schedule. I was like, man, I'm just so tapped right now. I would love to do something like this. Gadget is such a cool program. Or app or service or whatever you want to call it. But they're doing really cool things. And Mo obviously knows what he's talking about. He's one of the guys that created Shopify checkout, right? So, dude is super smart, really knows what he's doing, really committed to the space. And, I just had to be real honest, was like, I don't think so. Especially coming out of summer here. My kids are finally going back to school. And so that is going to give me a lot more consistency in my schedule, which is great. But I've got 2 projects that have been kind of just hanging over my head that I really just need to button up and launch. And so I'm looking forward to that. And I really can't commit to something like that probably.
Plus all my demands,
unfortunately,
on your time. So
plus all of your demands, right? I didn't want to say anything. That was the subcontext there, reading between the lines. So I'm glad you're good at that. But Gadget also came out where it's not just Shopify specific. They're expanding to any kind of JavaScript app or whatever in general. So it's pretty neat. I think it's a pretty cool tool. They're some real smart guys. So guys and gals over there that are just really, really good at what they do.
Yeah. I always feel a little incompetent whenever I read anything from them, because I either interact with Mo or Ralph. And Mo's, doing crazy technical stuff. I'm sure Ralph is too, but Ralph often tweets about his different backpacking, hiking adventures that he goes on. It's like, oh, that guy's hardcore.
Yep.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I went for a walk around the block today. It was hot. It's good.
Whoa. Yeah. Jeez. Yeah. It already warmed up, right?
I'm just saying, compared to what he does on a typical day or weekend, okay.
Yeah, heavy backpacking. He's going miles and miles. Yeah, I can't remember one. It's always hard because he's doing, I think he does the international, so he's in kilometers, where he's talking about all this hiking he's doing. And so I'm trying to do the math on how far that always is or whatever. It always sounds really far though. I think I'm going to switch to kilometers too. I think it sounds way cooler. I did 25 kilometers today. And, that's 13 miles or something like that, right? Or whatever. But it sounds way cooler if it's kilometers. So I'm going to start converting too, I think.
And they can start saying clicks. I did 13 clicks today.
Ooh, yeah, that's cool. Is clicks kilometers or is that miles?
No, I feel like I've heard it used in a kilometers context, but
okay. It makes sense. Clicks, kilometers. Yeah, makes sense.
All right. Someone listening to this is going to understand our ignorance and costs out, and which is totally fine. So that's what I've been focused on.
Which is good.
And I'll be honest, working on that, I'm circling back now. Working on the function and learning React, it's been very refreshing. I don't do as much coding in my main gig right now, and I forget sometimes how much I actually like the codes, especially learning something new. It's just the puzzle, like how come I can't figure out how to get a resource from an API and do something with it in a way that works, right? Because the whole paradigm is different for me, right? It's reactive. I'm not used to that. I'm used to imperative programming, functional programming, that kind of stuff. So it's been fun. Stretch the brain.
Well, if it makes you feel better, the front end dev stuff. So interesting enough, I've also been working a little bit on checkout extensions and trying to refresh myself on React that I haven't touched in a while. Well, so I've been moving a lot of folks where we were pretty seriously looking at moving our checkout.liquid customizations that we had. So before currently we had access to checkout.liquid to do some of this fancy customization stuff if you're Shopify Plus. So that way they can do some stuff in the checkout. And so we do that just with JavaScript, right? And so, Shopify said, oh no, we're doing these checkout extensions now, so you need an app. So not super great, but now we're back to, okay, well, we've got this pathway for extensions only, which we talked about. So if it's an extension only kind of type thing, and it's real bare bones, right? Like, which I can talk a little bit about, just like some of the caveats or pain points of that. Maybe we'll do a more fleshed out episode at some point, but
sure.
The way that I did that before, I would still bake in some settings basically into the stores, their theme settings. And so you can kind of pass along, like, oh, we want this product to be at checkout as the upsell item or what have you. But now with the extensions only options, there's just no way to do that at all. It's just straight logic that runs. So it's good for a banner or a persistent item that we want to show at checkout all the time kind of type thing. But it's really not a good use case for most things. So really, we are going to have to reach for things that are front end devs converting these things if you want any kind of interface at all to something like Gadget or, just becoming a little bit of a back end dev too. So, so playing around with that a little bit this week. And getting used to like React hooks and stuff or whatever. Like just like having to like relearn some things that I haven't had touched in a while. So that biggest thing then, aside from that, this other app or other project I'm trying to push out is an update. So a agency had built a client that I'm working with a custom theme a while ago based on a premium Shopify theme. And so now they wanted to update to Online Store 2.0 and get all, the nice fancy stuff or whatever that comes along for the ride. And so that's been a project that's just been a persistent thing, just with a lot of custom templates and things like that, and a larger, more established site. And so we keep running into little bits and pieces of things too. Like they have a brick and mortar, and we couldn't do some things because it would mess with their POS and all this other stuff. And so handful of little pieces there that have tripped me up, that have kind of brought me back to the drawing board on some things. So
now, is that a project
but it's
that
been
you
good.
bid a fixed cost for, or is it an hourly one? Like, are you feeling the pressure because you're eating the cost of overruns, or are you okay?
Yeah, that's a good question. So no, at least for me, the way that it kind of came out was, hey, here's like the range of like what we would be looking for. So I usually try to do that in an instance where if something is that deep, where we've got a bunch of custom templates and stuff happening, other third-party vendors and things of that nature we have to like worry about accounting for, that's when I'll provide a range. And they've been really great about when things have taken a little bit more time and stuff so far. So no, I'm not thankfully eating the cost there and those sorts of things, but I also communicated very much so up front, like without more information, it's going to be really hard to do the discovery that we need to do on this or what have you. So no, that part's been good. It's just more about, in the way that I did this summer, I scaled back a lot, kind of worked more so with existing clients and didn't worry about like onboarding anybody new or taking on anything new, because I wanted to have a more flexible schedule while my kids were out of school for the summer. Now that they're going back, going to ramp things up. And then obviously like Black Friday, Cyber Monday projects start, really start stacking up, and the rest of the year will get scheduled out for me here probably pretty soon.
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Well, one last question in terms of your personal update. So I know 2 weeks ago you were supposed to do that triathlon that you managed to get canceled.
Oh, I totally forgot about
planting the E. coli in the water. Yeah. Which, so we went to that same park last weekend.
Yeah.
And my daughter's like covered in hives now. Which
No, are you
I'm not blaming the
serious?
water. She was in the water. I'm not blaming that. I don't know if she's got E. coli, but it was interesting. I thought it'd be the whole weekend because like, oh, this is the park where Taylor was going to crush it. But what have you done in the interim as you kind of wait for them to reschedule? Like, are you still training? Are you just sitting on the couch now? What's going
Yeah,
on?
so they did cancel that week. So thankfully, I was able to get out of like the hotel and everything or whatever that we were going to stay at the night before, because it's a couple hours away from me. I know it's closer to you, but at least for us, I've still just been training, and they just straight up cancel it. Typically, what they would do is they'd either reschedule a race like that, or they would just say, okay, well, if we're not going to do the swim event, we'll just do what's like a duathlon. So you're just going to bike and run. And they didn't do that at all. They just straight up canceled it. So I'm not sure if they didn't want to deal with the logistics. So I did have to find another race that's actually going to be in Akron area, so Portage Lakes. And so I have still been training and stuff, just not probably like as much, because I kind of honestly like hit a little bit of a wall. It was pretty disappointing when it got rescheduled,
Yeah.
and I had already been ramping down, because you have this idea where you ramp up, you train intensely, and then coming into your race like the week prior, you kind of like ramp down so that way you're not, taper. That's the term. Oh man, you're good at this.
I'm an
And
athlete.
so you're an athlete, yeah. And so I kind of had started that, and then didn't really have anything planned for post, other than just like kind of like standard, like not getting too lazy. And but yeah, so I've still been working out and doing the training pieces for that. It's definitely not as intense probably as it was before. So it'll be all right though. The interesting thing about this, so there's we've talked about my size before, my girth. I'm like right around 250 pounds. I'm a heavier dude. And so there is a race division in triathlon called Clydesdale for like if you're over 220 pounds. For the women's that are in their like heavier than whatever the average would be class, it's like the Athenas. I don't know why for the dudes it's like you're Clydesdales. But the interesting thing is for this race, so I can actually race in that division, and so it's a little bit less pressure, and maybe that's why I don't feel like as intense about it. But I'm going to be racing against other dudes who are like my size kind of type thing. And there's only 2 other guys set up, so if that actually like pans out, that means we're each guaranteed like a medal, because there's only 3 dudes in that division. So I'm going for gold in this one.
That's the way to do it, man. I think of you when I go out. I try to get exercise in the morning. Usually it's like a half an hour walk or run or something like that. And every time I go, I was like, oh, I got to do something good, because I know Taylor's probably swimming 6 miles or biking 20 miles or running. I don't know what he's doing, but I got to do more than just fast walk for 20 minutes here. So
it's true. I'll start texting you. Be like, I'm already 5 miles ahead of you today. So
well, of course, by the time I do it, you probably do it like at 6 a.m. or something. I'm out there like more
I
8,
I do. It's the only way I can get it done. And if I don't do it first thing, there's always things that will push it back. I'll be like, no, I have to get this project done or whatever. Like, oh, the kids need this done. So if I don't get it done first thing in the morning, I'll find so many excuses not to do it. So that's my best strategy.
Your first winter in Ohio since you moved, or your second?
No, it'll be my second since I moved, which I did used to live here years and years ago, but yeah. So
well, just in terms of like 6 a.m. in December is a lot different than 6 a.m. in August. So
yeah, Good luck with that. Yeah. Well, I was running in December last year. I would get up and go, but usually, especially when it was like heavy snow or if it was just real wet outside, I'd go to our local YMCA. We have a membership there, so I'd run on a treadmill. I hate running on treadmills though. It's so boring. Even if you can watch TV or YouTube or whatever, it's just awful being stuck on a treadmill. I like run outside so much more.
Yeah, totally with you, man. Well, thanks for the update, and if you want to come do a race, there's one right by my house. I live by an airport, and they have what they call a 5K on the runway, which on one hand sounds awesome. On the other hand sounds annoying. But if you want to enter that race, I think it's coming up in a week or two, so you can probably still get in.
Oh man, I do need a good excuse to run down there. So now that the kids are finally back in school and off my back, I can probably pop down there pretty quick.
Run on down and then run on the runway and run home. So
not running down. No way. I'll take my bike down that has a motor in it. My motorcycle down there. I wouldn't take an actual bike or run down there. Woof.
Woof indeed.
But hey, we're talking about migrations, right?
Yes.
Finally, I saw your migrating to Columbus. Mike, how about you migrate your shop over to Shopify? So we were talking about like what to talk about, and it looks like you're trying to outdo me on the note taking here because you put in some really great, like this really awesome outline here for you, which I don't know if you felt like you needed that for talking points or whatever, because
No,
like mine was just like a bullet point, like try to provide some insights here about my migrations, you know. So
sometimes it all just comes together, and yeah. No, I just wanted some notes right last night. I was thinking about it. I was like, oh, here's what I was thinking, and it just got in my head. So yeah, let's talk migrations. One of the projects that I have often been tasked with doing is migrating from one store in like a different system, BigCommerce most often, to Shopify. And so having done it a couple of times, there's just some patterns and themes that I've recognized. And having done it recently with a very large store that had, I think, upwards of 250,000 orders already in place, plus subscription payments, I thought it'd be helpful just to kind of talk to you what it was like for me to go through that process. It's actually still sort of in process, though we're mostly done. And
nice.
Take you along for my journey, my descent into madness here. So,
no, like I said, I have not done a migration from BigCommerce. Yeah. So really interesting with some of the things that we've talked about just briefly. So I'm really excited that we get to dive into this a little bit more, because I think especially when you're using a tool like Matrixify, it's actually pretty easy to do if you're doing something like WooCommerce, because there's a nice API integration. And so BigCommerce, though, sounds so much more involved than something that would be a simple migration from WooCommerce. So I'm interested to hear about the
what you just said. That just triggered another thought, so I'll have to add to my bullet points here. But and I'll try not to make this a monologue, so please interrupt me, because no one wants to hear me read my bullet points. But the first thing that comes to mind is, I would say, number one, check your attitude about the third-party system or second-party system, however it is, because I feel like whenever I come into one of these things, it's like, oh, whatever piece of software this is a total piece of crap. Like, this is going to be terrible, blah, blah, blah. And what a piece of garbage. How can anybody ever use this? Well, that's not going to help you with the migration, right?
Right. Yeah,
so
no,
exactly. It is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing is to come to terms with that, and then kind of poke around and see, like, what opportunities do they offer for exfiltrating data? Is it simply exporting into a file format? Is there an API? Are there some people that have already been down this road that have good documentation that you can kind of base it off of, or they're good tools? So it doesn't help to sit there and cringe and talk about how terrible it is. So some of us are more important than others. So if that's you, so that's a good first step right there, right?
Mm-hmm. Check the attitude at the door.
Check the attitude, that's right. The second thing is, you basically, when we're thinking in terms of Shopify, we're kind of getting down to three main categories of data we're trying to get out, right? One, customers, products, and orders.
Mm-hmm.
And they all sort of fit together, as we know. But a lot of those systems have distinct ways of getting at those. And so your point about WooCommerce having a good API, that triggered me, because when I was thinking about our talk today, I was only thinking about what the process was for getting orders out. And the reason is because in BigCommerce, that's a big pain. But actually, the customers and the products are pretty easy. And that was because they do actually have a pretty decent API for that. And Matrixify specifically has the ability to go in and grab it from that way. So
nice.
Yeah. So that was the first thing that I did. It was pretty straight orders. I used their docs to get API access to those things. The only trouble was, depending on how you have BigCommerce set up, like who's in charge of it, getting an actual API credential into BigCommerce can be a challenge, because they have a lot of permissions. Sometimes you have to kind of sort through those. And in this particular case, someone else is administrating BigCommerce, and so it took a bit of back and forth just as a consultant to like guide them into, here's what I need from you. No, that didn't work. Please give me the permissions I need. No, that didn't work. No, really give me the permissions I need. Okay, finally that worked. That kind of thing.
So there was, even from the client, there was like another like middleman, so to speak, in charge of issuing permissions?
Yeah, in this case, it was the store owners themselves, right? And then there was a third-party technical group they were working with to actually manage BigCommerce. And then there was the group I was with, which was in charge of bringing that into Shopify. And so it was kind of a circle of fun. But everybody was
this
great.
Was like another agency, so to speak, that was managing like their BigCommerce instance. Okay, gotcha.
And if they're listening, I mean, they were great. It just adds impedance to the whole thing. So,
well, yeah, every extra layer. Well, the bigger the organization, right, that always taps on time, more complexity, versus as opposed to like you're working directly with a brand owner who has permissions over everything. It's just like, oh yeah, here's all your. Even when I ask for stuff, I'll ask for permissions to get into a Shopify store. you can, I try to like request only permissions that I need, right? But a lot of times when you're working at brand owner, they're just like, I just gave you all the permissions. It's fine. And you're like, okay, like I didn't actually need all of that. And I would encourage you not to do that with everybody, but like, thank you. That would make my life easier, I guess, in the future. So, that always adds some complexity there. So.
Yeah, and in this particular case, it was hampered by the fact that I don't really know BigCommerce apart from poking at this person's site, and so I didn't know exactly what it was I needed because I couldn't mess around with it on my own. I just had to read the docs and kind of hope for the best. And the docs, depending on the system, they're hit or miss. So we got sorted out, though. Got the API access, and the customers and products came over pretty easy, which was nice. Because that, obviously, is a whole world of pain for a lot of folks, right? Especially products, making sure the descriptions and the images and all the variants, all that stuff comes over. And so, unfortunately, if that's a struggle for you, a pain point for you right now, I don't have a lot to offer other than hopefully you're using Matrixify, and hopefully whatever system you're coming from makes it easy. That's been my case for the most part. So,
nice. I was going to say, so customers and products, relatively simple. It's orders that were really the complicated part.
Yeah, in this case. And that comes down, as far as I can tell, to two things. One is Matrixify didn't seem to offer an API way to grab these. And so what I was left with was Matrixify's format and BigCommerce's format.
Right.
And, so what I determined pretty quick was that there was not going to be an easy way to do this without involving some custom logic. And so being a Rubyist, I grabbed for the best tool for the job, which is a Ruby script. And so what I ended up doing was determining, okay, what is the data I can get out of BigCommerce? And they actually have a system for creating what they call an export template where you can choose what fields you want.
Nice.
And so I was
Can you order the way that they show up and stuff too to make it easier, like once you do get it pulled out and get Matrixify to bump it back in?
Not really, which is part of the need for the script again. And so once I was able to export a few test orders and kind of see like what was this information going to look like, and then I really poured over the Matrixify docs, and they have some pretty good documentation showing like what are the required fields for an order import, what are some of the accessory fields of things you do or don't need, right? And so then it became an issue of like just writing a script to kind of basically ingest a CSV file that I exported out of BigCommerce, and then emit another CSV file that was in Matrixify's preferred format. There's lots of details I could go into there, but for the sake of our time and our audience, I won't necessarily. But the big one that really necessitated the script is with BigCommerce, when they export an order, they have this fun little technique of like all the order information about line items, they just shove into a single field. So, which is great.
Here it all is.
You've got this row representing an order, and then if it had, 5 line items in the order, they're all just embedded in a single column in the spreadsheet in CSV. It's like, okay. So Matrixify wants a separate row for every line item in an order.
Right.
And it's all linked together by the order number, right? And then you specify in each row, there's a column that tells you like what kind of row this is. Is it a line item row? Is this a shipping fulfillment row? Whatever. And so the script basically had to go through each order coming out of BigCommerce, parse through the row or the column containing all the order information, and split it out into the different components and create new rows in the spreadsheet I'm sending over to Matrixify. That was the hardest part because one of the things that you run into is like, how do you take this glob of pretty much unformatted text and then regex it out, parse it out into some distinct elements? And for the most part, it works, but then they'll throw things in, like sometimes they used product labels that had like a colon in it, that it broke the other, so there's just a lot of edge cases I had to catch with the regex.
Right.
That made that challenging.
Right. So there wasn't any consistent like identifier to split there in that instance. Right. Everything was just kind of dumped in there, and you're just trying to figure out like how to parse out all of that data to get it something distinguishable that you could split it into different rows when you're trying to bump it into Matrixify. Woof. And you're talking about like, how much did you say? Like how many orders? Like
250,000.
Yeah, like that's not a small amount of use cases. Well, and so when you're dumping this into initially, at least, do you have like a separate store that you're kind of like pushing all this stuff too in order to cache the failures before you're actually going to do like a final push, say, to like the actual store we're going to be migrating over to? Or what is the use case for that, for an actual kind of like dev store in that instance? Because I haven't had to deal with like that many potential scenarios, right? Where if we're pulling that much data and we're getting that many potential failures, because we've all done that before, where like, all right, we're going to change this and we're going to catch this. And it's like, oh, okay, like we'll just pop back with like 1,000 errors or something. Like, well, like crap. Okay. Well, like now figure out this use case. Like, okay, I got that down to 837. Okay, great. Like now, and so where is that in that back and forth? Do you have like a staging or dev store set up for that? Or
It's a great question.
What does that look like? Mm-hmm.
So in this particular case, I was fortunate in that this was a brand new store in Shopify. So essentially it was the sandbox, right? So no one else was depending on the data at this point. And as a programmer, one of the best things you can do for yourself is to set up a tight feedback loop, whether it be like a compilation thing or testing thing, whatever. The quicker you can run your changes, get the feedback, the better. And so what I ended up doing was I exported like a week's worth of data out of BigCommerce. Mm-hmm. So it was still a fair number of orders, like 100 orders, something like that. And so I would use that as my test. And so I would import that into Shopify, see what went wrong, and then delete it out of Shopify. Using Matrixify, that was another trick, was it's like, how do you delete 100 orders quickly? It's like, well, actually you can. Matrixify, you just import the order numbers and a command called delete and you're done, right? So it was maybe a minute or two in terms of the feedback loop. So it wasn't super quick.
Nice.
But it was better than, the importing from Matrixify can take hours depending on how much data you're bringing in, right? So
right, exactly. Yeah, it's a lot, right?
Because it's making all these API calls. It's not like a straight up file import in the backend. It's actually making Shopify API calls, and so there's throttling going on. There's just the natural stuff of how long it takes going on. So,
well, and there are limits too to what you can upload at a time. And Matrixify is pretty good about like queuing stuff as necessary, right, or whatever. Yes. But like in the instance that you're talking about, I don't remember what the limit is, or what have you. I was gonna ask what kind of limitations are you having to work around, where something like Matrixify is almost necessary, because just from the time factor that you're saving using a tool like this, as opposed to trying to batch everything in like 1,000 orders at a time and like uploading this manually to get around stuff.
Well, that's the good question, Taylor. So even with Matrixify, like they have 4 different plan levels, I think, at the time I was looking at it. And so, the store owner, I told them to please install the app. They installed the app and they picked, I think it was like the lower or medium level, which was fine. But then as I got into it, what I discovered was like one order in BigCommerce would translate into a lot more lines for Matrixify. And so I was going to realize it's just going to take forever. Like I was going to have to split up the data. And then if you're doing that, like if you've got 250,000 orders and you say you have to do them in batches of 10,000 or whatever, right? Now you have to not only do all the data conversion stuff, but now you've got to track on your own where you're at in that process of splitting it up and inputting it in Matrixify. So that just introduces a whole lot of opportunity for making mistakes, overlapping data, missing data, that kind of stuff. It's just a nightmare, because it's not like you can track it and boom, 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 queue it all up. It's like you've got to wait for Matrixify to finish, because another part of this loop is that when Matrixify finishes, there's almost always errors in the data you sent over, right? So now you've got to download the results out of Matrixify, identify those error columns, and then deal with those as well. So I'm going to talk about that here in a second. Long story short, I cheated and said, look, guys, the difference between what you're paying now for Matrixify versus like their super duper unlimited plan, the cost maxes out at $200 a month, which is a lot of money. But that's like an hour.
Not when you're paying the dev's time, though.
Right.
I was going to say.
You know what I mean? Depending on the dev, right? So it's like, just upgrade. We'll get a whole month, and then I won't have to split this stuff up. It's going to work a lot better. And luckily, they were agreeable to it. And once that was done, you just downgraded back to the other plan, right? It's not a big deal. Matrixify makes it easy to do that. So
yeah. And that's sometimes like that's the conversation you have to have, right? Is like there are instances where people don't want to pay for like the high end plan or whatever, because they are looking at them as, oh, this is one app and it's $200 a month, and you have to kind of explain, well, this is not $200 a month every month ongoing for the end of time here that your store is running. We need the capabilities that this has specifically for this instance, and you can always drop it back down, or we're not using Matrixify. We actually don't have to maintain after that fact. This is how they make their money, these big migrations, right? So Yeah, it's not a hard sell when you do the math on, well, this is what I'm going to charge hourly, and if I can't use a tool like this, this is how much this is going to end up costing.
Yeah.
That's real easy math to showcase right there, right?
Exactly, because the crazy thing is when we upgraded to the big plan, I'd imported maybe a month's worth of data up to this point as part of my process. Like, okay, now I've got like the rest, like 3 years worth of data to bring over, the other 220,000 orders, whatever it is. So it upgraded the big plan so it would handle it all in one swoop, one big file. And then when I uploaded it to Matrixify, it took, I think, 4 days for it to finally churn through that. So you imagine me as a developer like having to split all that up and then one thing at a time, get it up there. Again, because it's not just having to split up multiple files and getting them into Matrixify and having them crunch, but it's dealing with, now you've got 10 files and 10 sets of error records you have to bring back into some place to kind of work through those. So yeah, it's just way easier if you can. The cost is almost always worth it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's just...
Well, yeah, because in software, that's the nice thing about it from that perspective, as opposed to you doing it manually. I mean, it took Matrixify 4 days, but,
right.
You having to work through all that in a manual process would have taken several weeks because that was running 24/7, right, while it was running. So, very, very different then.
I'll also say, in terms of the script I wrote, going back to that here for a second, people often talk about AI and ChatGPT and this and that, and I actually felt I got some pretty good usage out of that this time around because, like I said,
nice.
Ruby's my background. I'm Rubyist. I'm very comfortable writing a script for that. But there's just certain annoying things that you tend to forget, right? Like in Rails land, I don't often work with creating custom CSV files or figuring out how to do stuff. So it was really nice to have that prompt in the background where I could just say, okay, remind me again, like how do you do this one thing with CSV, and like get an answer. Like, okay, I'm pretty sure that's the real answer, not a hallucination, so I'll try it. And, it generally worked, or at least steered me in the right direction. And so I definitely found like that was a win, just keeping me unstuck. Even if it wasn't always perfect or the code that I really needed, it was enough that it kind of kept me moving forward. So that was a nice win there.
Well, and that's the big point where something like AI, like ChatGPT, or what's the Copilot, the other option here, or whatever, if you're just using that directly in something like VS Code or whatever, those are great tools for when you actually know what you're talking about, the right things to ask. And because there's this issue where people have talked about that, and they talked about this a little bit with Sidekick, where they're using AI, that Shopify's new AI tool that's going to be coming out, is the difficulty of getting consistent results. And you'll even see that in ChatGPT, where you can feed it pretty much the same prompt and it'll give you a different response. So you have to kind of know what you're talking about in order to, one, give it the right stuff to try to get something back that's going to actually be usable, and then two, be able to call it on its errors there, as far as like, no. So I see it more as like, when probably like kind of the same thing as early on, like when Google search comes out, right, and you're actually able to search for things like Ask Jeeves early on. It's kind of like this idea, but it actually gives you back something that you're looking for, instead of me having to sift through 18 different blog posts after I can find what I need on Stack Overflow or something, right? So that's really, really handy for something like that. It really cuts that time in half.
The one area I really wanted it to work well, but it just fell down, was some of these regexes I had to construct to parse out this weird data. It's like,
I love using it for regex, and it didn't work well for you?
Maybe I just didn't do the prompt right, but it was a pretty complicated thing I was trying to describe, right? And so
Gotcha. Yeah.
Everything that spit out was just slightly off. And some people just get regex. I've got a friend, Matt, if you're listening, I've always respected you for that. I know how to regex, but not to this level, right? And so I just didn't want to have to do that deep dive to get this little bit working. But unfortunately,
people who get regex are not human. Your friend Matt is a droid. But it's big brain stuff, right? As far as that, I do the same thing. I've always had to like look up the reference, even for simple stuff. And so now I use ChatGPT for that all the time. Like, I need this instead of having to work through it.
So once I got that working, the bulk of the stuff, what I also realized was that there was a couple of fields that I'm kind of backing up now. I'm being a React app. I'm non-linear. I'm updating some data that I shared with you earlier. So after I got the basic flow working with the order import, what I realized is that they also needed shipping data in the order in Shopify. Like, they wanted to see the tracking numbers, all this kind of stuff, which is legit. Totally get it. Sure. This is another thing that BigCommerce made a lot of fun, in that they don't export that information in the order export. Why would you? So
What?
that information is
What?
available, but you have
Okay.
to export a separate table called shipments, which luckily has the order number, but
Okay.
it's different, right? And so what I
Yeah.
ended up having to do is I ended up with a 2-step process. So the first thing I did is I exported all the shipment information out of BigCommerce, and I brought that over into a spreadsheet, and I had a script that went through that. And then what I was going to do was I was going to bunch that into the CSV of the order as I was going through the order CSV and bring them together and then put that in my final thing. What I discovered was that was way too slow for reasons I can't quite remember, but it just didn't work out. So the path I took was I wrote a second script in Ruby that took the shipment CSV out of BigCommerce and created a SQLite database of that shipment information. So it's basically the key was the order number, and then the columns were the necessary things about the shipment I wanted, which are basically like the tracking number and the shipping method and that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
So I first would construct that database, and then I would run my original script, and in the loop to generate the order CSV, I was able to then query the database for that order number and get an answer lickety split
Oh, nice.
for what it needed. Yeah.
That's I've heard so much about, and this is the ignorant front end dev me, is that SQL is like super helpful, like just for pretty much everything. Like if you can figure out like how to get good at SQL, like you're not gonna, it's kind of the same thing. If you're in web development, getting better at JavaScript, I feel like just always makes you a better developer. I feel like SQL is one of those things that always pops up that if you can get good at SQL, like it's just gonna make you a better developer, engineer, all around kind of type thing, because there's so many use cases for it. Yeah.
And the 90% of what you need to do with it is very easy to learn. I would think, right? We can go deep in the weeds for sure, but the basics of querying and joins and stuff like that, it's actually not too hard. So I think most
I've just never messed with. I've never really had to mess with it before, so it's something I definitely need to do. It needs to be on my radar, especially now that I'm starting to get more into app dev with all this checkout extension stuff or whatever. At a certain point, I'm going to need to learn how to mess around with databases and stuff like that.
So I missed something, but when I was working on it, the reason I went the SQL route was because if I had the CSV file of 200,000 shipment lines or whatever, right? When I'm going through my order, I'm basically using Ruby like, hey, look into the CSV data set, see if you can find the one that has the column that starts with this order number and bring it back, right? Pretty easy code to write, but the performance was just awful. And I'm realizing it's just because of the way the CSV data is structured, like it's having to go through all that information in memory and try to find it. And so if there was a better way to do it, I could have avoided the whole SQLite database thing. But honestly, especially, again, using ChatGPT to remind myself, like, oh, how do you just spin up a SQLite database real quick? Super easy. It's a couple lines of code.
Yeah.
Then you get the performance. It was just a no-brainer. Speaking of no-brainers.
A non-brainer.
So that was like the other tricky part. So, okay, you've got the orders now, you're munging the shipment information, you send it over to Matrixify. So the final step of this whole process is, again, when it finishes running, you get a whole bunch of errors back. Like it'll show you how many records were successfully imported and how many were errors, and it gives you the ability to download what they call the results file, which is basically all the original data you sent over, plus an additional column or two that explains whether it was successful or not, along with the reasons why it wasn't successful. So this is interesting. When you get that file back, what I was finding was I was getting an error rate of about 0.3% of the orders were failing, which doesn't sound like a lot, but 0.3% of 250,000, it was a lot, a couple thousand, right?
That's a lot. Okay.
And so now you're like, what do you do? Because you've got a couple thousand records. It's a lot of data. Like we're talking, 75 columns in this spreadsheet. So it's not easy to like look over necessarily. And the error messages they give you, they're very verbose, which is great, but it makes it hard to categorize them, right? You couldn't just sort the column, like show me all the phone numbers that failed, show me all the whatevers that failed. It just wouldn't work out. So you kind of had to introspect them almost one-on-one. What I ended up discovering was that there was a couple big classes of errors I was running into. One was it did not like if the customer was already in place and you were sending over customer information with a phone number. I don't quite understand to this point even why that was a problem, but the solution ended up being just delete the phone number out of the data. Right. So for those records,
I
like,
think
okay,
you'd run into that a lot, like the
Right.
same customer showing up again and ordering again. That's the whole goal of commerce.
it was
right?
weird,
But,
and there's probably
all right.
more to it than I took the time to dig into. But it basically was like, you know what, just delete the phone number. We'll get those over. So that was a big one. Another one was exceeding like column lengths. Like some of the notes for order notes were just full of garbage, essentially coming out of BigCommerce, and so finding those and deleting them.
Yeah.
Some other ones were weird. I kept running into this one that said, you cannot use this as the delivery method. I'm like, what are you talking about, delivery method? There's nothing delivery-esque about this. And then what I realized was that it was referring to the phone number. So this is the one trick I think people find helpful. The errors that Matrixify is sending back are actually the API error messages coming right out of Shopify. And so if you're trying to understand, like, what is Matrixify hung up on here, the best thing to do is actually open up an API Explorer or whatever and start messing with that particular row's worth of data, sending it over to Shopify and seeing what you're getting back, because that's a way you can kind of narrow down to whatever data is causing those problems. So what I realized is delivery was referring to phone message delivery. And so it was the phone number that was causing problems.
So
Didn't say
when
that.
you talk about, it didn't say that. So when you talk about like testing those by like popping something, so are you using something like Postman, or are you using like the GraphQL Explorer? Like what are you using for something like that?
I was using the Ruby API gem and the console.
Okay.
But any
Gotcha.
tool that lets you talk with Shopify's API is fine. So you can use curl for all I
Right.
care, as long as you get the tokens right. So just some way of playing with the API. But the big takeaway there again is that Matrixify doesn't have like a special error language. It's just passing
Right.
up
It's
the codes
it's
from
just
API.
like, this is what Shopify told us, and this is what
Right.
we're passing along here. Okay, gotcha.
Which makes sense. And so once you uncover that,
Yeah.
it's helpful. And so then that it really just became this process of like going through those records, trying to identify the categories of what was going wrong, making those updates. The other big one, at least in this data set I had, was it would sometimes have no shipping address information, but it would have billing address information. And so just copying the billing into the shipping because it wanted the shipping address worked. Another one
Is it just
was
because someone who would mark like this is the same, or like when it would be different? Like why would it be separate? Like, you know what I mean?
yeah. Why did it complain about that? I had to look back at my notes to remember, but it
It's
just
a
didn't
small
like it.
point of contention. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it didn't like it, so that's all that matters. I was just curious.
Another big one was phone numbers. Like a lot of the phone numbers coming out were just garbage, and I spent a lot of time trying to make those work. Like I added a lot to my script to like check if the phone numbers were in the right format. But phone numbers, a lot like names, when you look at data from an international perspective, there's just no standard. It's all over the place, and so it's like, all right, I could kill
Right.
myself
So well,
trying to figure this out. Or
in in their own database, they didn't format it how it was stored. It was just all like, here's just how it was dumped in.
well, the way I don't know how it was in the database, but what they sent out was just a random string
Gotcha.
of numbers. This is not helpful.
Yeah.
Is
Yuck.
this the country code? I don't know. It's just 16 digits. All right, whatever. So I got over that too, and I guess that's kind of the final point of what I'm working on in terms of sharing here is that when it comes to importing stuff, especially data sets this long, don't let perfect become the enemy of good. Is that what I'm trying to say? Like you could kill yourself trying to get
Good.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good's the enemy of great. Well,
Yeah, something like that.
Good's the enemy of
great.
great. Like that's, I don't know about the perfect thing. Maybe that's straight up Karl.
Maybe I'm not. No, what I'm trying to say is like settle for the 90%. Don't try to get to the 100%.
So good. Yeah.
You'll just kill yourself.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
No, that's my experience as well in migrations too. There's just sometimes where you're gonna have to rerun batches. Like it's just what it is,
Yep. And if you have a client, if you're doing this from a customer, like client perspective, like you got to just be honest with them and communicate well and help them understand the cost benefit ratio, right? Like you want your historical data in Shopify. I totally get that. Let's get that over for you. But it's not going to be as perfect as the system that you're currently using in terms of the data quality, perhaps. And you need to realize, are you okay with that? Like what are the business cases? What are the big problems that you might be trying to solve where that would actually cause you trouble? Because most likely it's not going to cause you trouble.
Yeah. And that's, so I had that come over where we did that on a store that had 10,000 plus SKUs, and I was using Matrixify, and they basically came back several times with, we migrate all these products over, and then they decide, you know what, like we actually want this to be the format, or we want basically to totally change how we're like providing this or whatever.
Right.
And so I probably deleted and then re-imported all of this stuff like I mean, at least 4 times, you know? And so
awful.
it was, yeah, it was a lot. And so it's just one of those things, like you had mentioned, it's one of those things that it's not going to necessarily be perfect. You're going to have to redo some stuff. So when you are walking into a migration gig of any sort, whether you've done it several times or not, I don't think you can ever go in and confidently be like, this is going to happen first run. It's something you're going to need to do a couple times. You're going to have to be in good communication with the client as well. And then, yeah, end of the day, weighing the pros and cons of like, how perfect or close to this does this need to be? Because some of that, especially when it comes to orders is tough. You really can't do it without some way of integrating with the API. You can't just directly load, or there's no import feature outside of the API, right? And so you're using a tool like Matrixify if you're not going to roll your own. And you might as well use Matrixify because that's Shopify's recommended tool anyhow. So at the end of the day, right, it's historical data. So at least you've got it is the biggest thing in there.
For sure. Well, there was a whole other section I was going to talk about, but we've been yammering almost an hour now, so I think I'll save that for some future day. But you want to talk about picks or changelog? I got one changelog thing.
Oh, let's hear your changelog.
Yeah, well, you didn't put anything, so I thought I better go find something.
I did.
Doing all the work.
I did.
Okay.
I've got one, yeah, but you can do one and I'll do one.
All right. I just saw on the changelog recently an announcement that for folks that are working with the point of sale, the POS, that there's a new release of the UI extensions kit, which has a bunch of stuff if you're doing UI extensions in the POS world. You might want to check that out. Taylor will put links in the show notes so you can get to that. And they included a Figma file too, so you can take a peek at what the actual components look like. But yeah, I don't know how many folks are doing POS development.
I don't know anybody.
Yeah, but someone would be. It was supposed to be the hotness, and I don't know what happened, but here we are.
Well, I don't want to rag on POS. I've had folks that really like the POS, and I've had folks that have really not liked POS, and so it's just one of those things. I think I think it does need a lot of love, and so it's definitely like untapped territory. I think for devs who want to iterate in that space, I think it's a good deal. So, and it's nice that they are investing a lot more in it too. So, and it's awesome.
Cool. What's your pick?
My change pick was they are continually building out meta objects a little bit more. So there is a changelog update for renderable and online store capabilities for meta objects. But basically, these renderable capabilities enable SEO metadata attributes in meta objects. So the handy thing about this is like the way that they're further pushing more and more into, we're going to be able to build like custom pages and things like that using meta objects, really even outside of just using something like a template specifically for this or what have you. So just meta objects are going to continue, it seems like, to expand more. So they do have the option now where this is capable where if you're using meta objects in a custom storefront, right, like in a headless situation, it now has this ability where you can actually implement SEO metadata into it as well. And if you're using it on the online store, just like if you go into add a custom data and then add a meta object definition, there's now like a little feature flag that you can click on that where it's enabled for web pages. And it'll actually give you this option where you can include things like page title, meta description, and all this other stuff. So they're really building that out a lot more. I'm starting to get more into meta objects. It's still a lot to use, but it's definitely something that I call that as a pick just because they're definitely making this more available where like, hey, if we want to use this as like a landing page or something like that we're building out, we need SEO for that. And so now at least the initial building blocks are here where we're going to be able to deal with that directly, whether it's in the online store or in a headless option as well. So we'll link that up in the notes as well, both to the changelog and then also to the dev docs there and the new capabilities there.
Whenever I think of headless storefronts, I always think I'd like to build a headless storefront toolkit myself, like a build system. Yeah. And I would call it Ichabod. And then the building tool I would call Crane. And then we'd have Ichabod Crane for our headless storefront.
That's perfect.
Okay.
You put so much thought into this.
I did. All right, so pick of the week. For me, I've been playing around, like I said, with ChatGPT and Copilot and stuff like that, and using them to some level of success. But then I was reading some articles yesterday about the new model that Meta Facebook Meta put out, and
Okay,
was
gotcha.
looking at that a little bit more. And I'm sure people are way ahead of me in terms of discovering this stuff. But I took a deeper look at a tool called Lama, if you're familiar with it all.
Oh, a little bit. I think Toby tweeted about this,
Did
right?
he? Okay.
Maybe.
And the whole thing is it lets you run, create, and share large language models. And you can download it and run it. And since we now have access to some of these even program-specific models, like the one that Meta put out yesterday, I'm running this from my terminal. And it's just like a Chat GPT session, but it's all local. I'm not paying for it. It's using these models. It's pretty cool. And there's some people that have built some GUIs for it as well. And there's even some tools. I think one's called Continue that brings it into VS Code as well. So it's hard to believe it would have the same level of polish as like a Copilot, which is, got a team of developers working to make it seamless with VS Code. But for folks that don't have access to that or just want to play with it or have a budget, it's certainly an awesome opportunity.
Very cool. This is awesome. Man, I need to look into this a little bit more. So I'll do like a related pick. So one of my tools that I've been using as well when we're talking about the terminal and also has some AI suggestions is the Warp terminal. Have you seen that?
No.
So
I
it's
think
a really
OS2 Warp.
OS2 Warp from what?
Haven't you ever heard of OS2 Warp? OS2 version 3.0. It was called Warp back in the day. I bought it at Babbage's. It was 33.5-inch discs.
No.
It was pretty cool.
No. Well,
Sorry.
this is nothing nearly as cool as that. It's just a really nice terminal. So for a while, I was using Fig.io to get like nice things like auto completions and stuff like that running, and it's just got some really handy things in the terminal. But now, so something along the lines of, I just think it's handy, like with Warp, simple things like that's actually like clickable. So like you can actually copy and paste into your terminal, all this other stuff. So I'll send over a link to that. I don't know if I had sent you a link or not for that. Well, I didn't update the show
you
this time
hadn't.
because yours looked so good, and so I didn't want to like go jumping in there and mess everything up. But so I'll at least drop this, but it'll also be I'll drop this in our chat here, but then I'll also throw it up in the show notes here. But it is a really nice little terminal. You can do fun little stuff with it too, like change the background. It's very customizable. But it does have the option to enable AI because it will auto suggest commands that you're trying to run based on whatever environment you're currently in at that time. So it has been pretty handy. It does sometimes kind of the same thing as anything else with AI. Sometimes it does give you inaccurate results so far. And so I think, though, it'll still continue to get built out. Either way, for the moment, it's pretty neat as far as what it can do. Definitely, if you don't want to, like, jump into playing around with those, like, ZSH, HRC files or whatever
Sure.
to, like, customize everything. This is just really nice. I felt like I was tweaking stuff all the time with those to get things working. I was using Hyper for a while, but it was kind of slow. And this is just fast. It works really, really well.
I do love me a good terminal. I'll have to check it out. I'm just curious if the AI is going to start suggesting things like rm-rf /, in which case it's
like it's going to try to ruin everything. Well, it's,
That's right.
Some self-preservation instance there. Hopefully, no,
Yeah.
don't get rid of it all. But yeah, so you probably need to be careful again. Like with anything else, that caveat of like if you're using AI, you need to know a little bit about what you're doing.
And this looks Mac specific.
I think that it is, yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
So sorry for you
As it
Windows
should be.
users. Yeah, I would say it's been so long that I've been using a Mac that I forget sometimes. But I don't know if you saw that online too. There's been a lot of back and forth on like people talking about how overdone a lot of the new Macs are and how Windows devices are really coming into their own here. I do like a lot of the stuff Microsoft's been doing lately,
Yeah.
investing in
I still
open
have a hard
source and all
time.
this other stuff.
Windows is the operating system. Oh, that was my bread and butter, Then I went to Linux, and then I had to get stuff done, so I went to Mac. So I can understand people that run Linux on PC hardware and do development. The Windows thing I still struggle with because I find it hard. But maybe I need to take another look. I'm humble.
Yeah,
I could do
well,
that.
as soon as they integrated like Windows sub Linux, right? Like that made things like a lot better. You can actually use
For
a
sure.
terminal on Windows and stuff now, so that's really handy.
Just feel like
but I
this is
think that
another
was just a
layer of
suggestion.
thinking that has to happen there. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah, I get
Like
that.
it's kind of Linux,
I
but it's
do.
not. So
Yeah, I do feel like things have gotten easier when I switched to a Mac. As far as like I've felt more productive in everything. So who knows? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It's been a while since I've had to touch a PC. You know.
although I will say the one thing I miss about running the PC is that gaming was so much easier. But I don't really game anymore, so it's okay. But it was nice to have a beefy machine
Yeah.
for both.
That's true. That's true.
Anyway,
Cool, man. I think
we ran
that
on quite a
covers it.
while.
That's all
Yeah,
the notes.
I think so.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Well, you had a lot of good things to say about migrations. I thought it was interesting. I know you're worried about people falling asleep here, but I thought it was really interesting.
Okay. Well, I'm sure that if you listen to it at 2x, it will be pretty palatable. So awesome. All right. Thanks, Taylor. Good to see you.
Yep. You too, man. Catch you next time.